The cashier had already pushed the milk back. 7 coins on the belt, loose, insufficient, and everyone in line knew it, and no one moved. "Please let me pay tomorrow." Her voice cracked through the fluorescent hum, thin and public, and past the point of dignity. Nobody stepped forward. The man 3 places back, worn jacket, calloused hands, set his basket down and placed a card on the counter without a word. He didn't look at her. He handed her the bag and walked out before she could form a question. Nobody caught his name. What none of them understood, not the cashier, not the crowd, not the old woman clutching her milk, was that the man who had just paid for her groceries could have bought the entire chain, and that this moment would cost him something the receipt could not measure. The alarm went off at 6:14. Not because Nathan Brooks needed the reminder. He had been awake since 4:50, staring at the ceiling, the way he did on mornings when the quiet got too specific. The apartment was cold, the way Seattle mornings are cold in October, the kind of cold that lives in the floorboards and moves up through your socks. He sat up. The phone on the nightstand showed 11 missed notifications from an account he checked only on weekdays, only after Ren was at school, only with the door closed. He put it face down. Coffee first. Then the lunchbox. Every morning in that order, not because the order mattered logistically, but because it was the only sequence that kept the morning from becoming formless. Ren's lunchbox was purple, with a constellation printed on the outside. Her mother had picked it out 14 months before she died, when Ren was 4, and still called stars sky dots. Nathan packed it the same way every time. Sandwich diagonal, apple slices in the small container. One note, written small, folded twice. Ren appeared in the kitchen doorway at 6:41, wearing one sock, carrying the other. "Dad, my hair." Nathan turned from the counter. He set down the knife, dried his hands, and braided her hair the way he had taught himself from a video 2 years ago. 3 attempts the first morning, 7 the second, acceptable by the end of the first week. He still counted the crossings under his breath. Ren stood still and watched the window. On the hook by the door, a teal apron hung where it had always hung. Cotton faded at the strings, printed with a pattern of small lemons. Nobody moved it. Nobody mentioned it. It was simply there, the way certain things in certain apartments are simply there, not displayed, not stored, occupying the precise space between memory and furniture. "Dad, does our fridge have pictures of food? Or actual food?" Ren asked this while he was zipping her backpack. "That's called strategic planning," Nathan said. "That's called, we need groceries," she said. He gave her the look. She gave it back smaller and with more accuracy. He put his jacket on. The phone lit up again on the counter, VB Capital Board call Thursday, and he turned the screen down and picked up his keys. They took the Volvo. Not the other car, the one in the parking structure 3 blocks over that Ren had never seen. The Volvo had a scratch on the passenger door from a parking lot in 2019 and a pine air freshener that no longer smelled like pine. Ren put her feet on the dashboard, and he didn't say anything about it. She watched the city go by, and he watched the road, and the morning passed between them, comfortable and slightly dented, the way mornings do when 2 people have learned each other's silences. He dropped her at school at 7:52. She jumped out without looking back, which meant she was fine. He sat in the pickup lane for 40 seconds after she disappeared through the doors. Then he drove to the supermarket. The automatic doors opened, and the cold came with them, the specific cold of refrigerated produce aisles, mixing with outdoor air, a smell of cardboard and citrus peel, and something underneath that is every supermarket, and no supermarket in particular. Nathan took a basket. He moved through the store the way he moved through most spaces, unhurried eyes tracking detail without pausing on it. Cereal. Milk. The apples Ren would inspect before accepting. Coffee, the kind in the red bag, not because it was better, but because his wife had switched to it the winter before she got sick, and he had never switched back. He heard it before he saw it. The cashier's register. The specific register silence that happens when a transaction fails. Not a beep, but the absence of one, followed by the kind of human quiet that means a crowd has collectively decided to witness something. Nathan moved to the next lane and looked over. The woman at the register was somewhere in her 70s, small in the way that is different from thin, the way a person becomes small when they have been carrying something too heavy for too long. 7 coins on the belt, a bottle of milk, a box of fever, reduce or a bag of bread marked down for quick sale. The cashier was young, probably 23, with the expression of someone who has been told the rules enough times to have stopped thinking about what they are for. "I can't override the system," she said. The woman's hands were shaking, not from cold. "Please let me pay tomorrow." Nathan set his basket down, walked to the register, put his card on the counter without looking at the cashier or at the woman or at the crowd behind them with their phones. The transaction cleared. He picked up the woman's bag, held it out to her. She took it. He walked out. He sat in the Volvo in the parking lot for 3 minutes without starting the engine. Then he started it. Then he sat for 2 more minutes. The woman had reminded him of something he could not name, precisely not a person, but a quality. The specific quality of someone who is asking for help in a language they have spent a long time pretending not to know. He drove out. At the intersection, he saw her walking, no bus stop nearby, no car moving slowly west, with the bag tucked against her chest. He turned west. The street she turned onto was called Alderton, which Nathan knew was in the Rainier Valley, and which Nathan had not driven down in 4 years. The houses on Alderton were the kind that have been standing since the 70s. Some maintained, some, not all of them, weighted with the particular gravity of neighborhoods where people stay, not because they love the place, but because leaving requires a kind of money that has not appeared. The woman turned into a narrow house, third from the corner, with a porch that listed slightly left. He parked across the street. There was a handmade sign in the window. Harbor Light Community Intake, Tuesday/Thursday. Under it in smaller text, "We are here." He sat with that for a moment. Then he drove to pick up Ren. That night, after Ren was asleep, he opened his laptop. Harbor Light Community Services, Seattle, founded 7 years ago by one Claire Bennett, 31, formerly of Public Health Administration, operating on a rotating coalition of grants and anonymous donations. Their largest anonymous donor, a foundation called VB Capital, had contributed for 2 consecutive years and then gone quiet in the 3rd quarter. He stared at that line for a long time. Then he closed the laptop and did not open it again until after Ren's breakfast the following morning. He showed up at Harbor Light on a Tuesday. The sound of it first, a space that is too large for the number of people in it, which means the voices carry differently, which means you hear conversations meant to be private. 3 desks, filing cabinets from a decade that no longer existed, a computer that clicked audibly when it processed anything larger than a spreadsheet. Nathan stood in the doorway with his jacket on, and a woman at the center desk looked up and said, "Are you here for intake or assistance?" And he said, "Neither. I saw your sign. I thought you might need hands." She studied him the way someone studies a contractor who arrives without being called. Claire Bennett was not tall, and she wore her hair pulled back in a way that suggested it was a practical decision made once and not revisited. Her eyes were the kind of brown that looks different in different light, darker when she was thinking, which appeared to be most of the time. "We need hands," she said. "We don't have budget for hands," he said. "That's fine." She said, "The boiler makes a sound on Tuesday mornings." He said, "I heard it when I came in." She handed him a flashlight. The boiler took 40 minutes. He found 2 additional issues, a pressure valve and a fitting that had been wrapped in tape instead of replaced, and fixed both without mentioning them. When he came back upstairs, Claire was on the phone. She looked at him, then at the ceiling as if she was listening for the sound that was no longer there. She said something into the phone and hung up. "You've done this before," she said. "Boilers," he said. "Fixing things," she said. "People fix what they know," he said, and put the flashlight on her desk. He came back Thursday, then the following Tuesday. He did not explain this, and she did not ask him to. The third Thursday, he brought Ren because the school had a half day, and there was no other arrangement. Ren walked in, looked at everything carefully, and went directly to the filing cabinet closest to Claire's desk, and said, "These are in the wrong order." Claire looked at her. "Alphabetical by intake date." Ren said, "But you should do it by zip code because that's how the buses run." Nathan started to say something, and Claire held up one hand at him, without looking, and said to Ren, "What's your name?" "Ren," she said. "I'm Claire," Claire said. "I know," Ren said. "Dad looked you up." Nathan looked at the ceiling. Claire reorganized 2 drawers with Ren's guidance. They worked in a silence that was not uncomfortable. At one point, Ren handed Claire a folder, and their hands overlapped briefly, and Ren did not move hers away immediately the way she did with most adults. Nathan was looking at the wall when this happened. He was not, however, not looking at it. That evening, Ren said, "She smells like the soap Mom used to order." Nathan did not answer. He sliced the carrots for dinner. The knife was very sharp, and the cutting board was very loud, and the kitchen was very small, and for approximately 30 seconds, none of those things were true in any meaningful sense. Victor Ashford arrived at Harbor Light on the second Tuesday of November in a car that did not belong on Alderton, and wearing the kind of coat that announces rather than covers. He was on the City Council's Development Subcommittee, which was a position he had maneuvered into over 3 years through a sequence of small favors and strategic absences. He sat across from Claire and explained in the language of concern that the building's lease would not be renewed. The block, he said, had been designated for community revitalization. He used that phrase twice. The second time he used it, he was looking at a spot above Claire's head the way people look when they are reading from something internal. Claire said, "The lease runs 14 more months." Ashford said, "There are provisions." She said, "Show me which ones." He said, "My office will be in touch." He left without touching anything on her desk, which meant he had assessed the desk and made a decision about it. Nathan was in the back room repairing a power strip when Ashford walked through. He heard the voice before he saw the face. He knew the voice not from meetings, not from events, but from a phone call 3 years ago in which Victor Ashford had told him with great patience that the Brooks family's grief did not entitle him to restructure the board in his late wife's name. Nathan had listened to the whole call. Then he had restructured the board anyway. He stayed in the back room. After Ashford left, he came out. Claire was standing at her desk with both hands flat on the surface, looking at nothing specific. "Old building," Nathan said. She looked up. He said, "I can check the lease language if you want." She said, "Do you know property law?" He said, "I know enough to know when someone's using the wrong clause." She pushed the folder across the desk. That night after Ren was asleep, Nathan made 2 phone calls. Neither call was from his personal line. He spoke quietly, briefly, and with the specific efficiency of someone who has learned that the length of an instruction is inversely proportional to its likelihood of being followed correctly. He hung up both times without saying goodbye, which was a habit he had and had not corrected, because correcting it would have required explaining why he had it. In the kitchen, the teal apron hung on its hook. He stood at the counter for a while with his coffee going cold. He was thinking about Ren's face when Claire handed her a folder. He was thinking about this more than he intended to, which was not a thing he had a plan for. The City Council's public development hearing was on a Wednesday morning, the room on the 4th floor of the municipal building smelling of carpet and recycled air, and the particular institutional warmth of a room that runs its heat at a fixed setting, regardless of season. Nathan sat in the 3rd row. He had worn the jacket with the worn elbows and left the other one in the car. Ren was at school. Claire sat in the 2nd row with 2 Harbor Light staff members and a folder she had been building for 3 weeks, the kind of folder that is heavy not from paper, but from what the paper means. Victor Ashford presented first. The presentation was elegant graphs that told a clean story, photographs of the block in soft light, projected revenue figures that floated in the precise range of plausible without touching the range of verifiable. The council members nodded at intervals. One of them wrote something down. Ashford was describing the timeline when he said without particular emphasis, "Even the anonymous benefactor behind Harbor Light VB Capital's Brooks Foundation has reduced support this quarter, signaling the project's non-viability." The room did not change, but in the 3rd row, something did. Claire turned. Not far, just enough. She was not looking for confirmation. The look had already arrived at its conclusion and was simply checking the math. Nathan met her eyes. He did not look away. She turned back to the front of the room, and for the next 4 minutes, she held the folder in her lap without opening it, and her hands on the cover did not move. Nathan stood when the floor opened. "May I respond to the financial analysis?" Ashford smiled with the part of the face that does not involve the eyes. By all means. Nathan walked to the front. He did not use the laptop that was already set up. He used the whiteboard. His handwriting was the small, precise kind that comes from years of annotating technical drawings in margins that don't allow for interpretation errors. He wrote 3 columns. In the 1st column, Ashford's projected land value. In the 2nd column, the assessed value per county records, pulled from a database Nathan had helped architect for 3 Pacific Northwest counties in 2018. In the 3rd column, the name of the development company listed as the Revitalization Partner and the name of its largest private shareholder. Victor Ashford's name was in the 3rd column. He wrote the conflict of interest statute number below it. He underlined it once, not twice once. Then he put the marker down. The room had the sound of a room in which nobody is ready to be the first person to speak. A council member leaned toward her microphone. "Mr. Brooks, how do you have access to these assessment records?" Nathan said. "Because I built the data architecture the county uses for public contract oversight. I know what to look for." She said, "And you are Nathan Brooks of Brooks." He said, "VB Capital." "Yes." At the back of the room, Victor Ashford was already on his phone. Claire was outside on the municipal building steps when Nathan came through the doors. The air was the kind of November air that carries moisture, but not yet rain, the kind that sits in your jacket after you've been outside for 5 minutes. She was looking at the street, not at a specific thing on the street, just at the street itself, the way you look at something when you are not ready to look at the thing you actually need to look at. "Brooks Foundation," she said. "Yes." "You've been funding us for 2 years." "Yes." "And you showed up to fix the boiler." He said, "The boiler needed fixing." She turned then. Her face had the expression of someone who has reorganized the furniture of a room in their mind and found that the room is different than they thought, not smaller, just differently shaped. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. "Because I needed to know if what you were doing was real, or if you just needed money." She said, "And it's real," he said. And then lower, "That scared me." She didn't say anything. The rain started, not heavily, just enough to be there. She put her hands in her coat pockets and looked at him, and he looked back, and neither of them moved, and the rain continued at its own pace, indifferent to the conversation it was falling into. She walked to her car. He watched her go. He stood on the steps until her taillights disappeared at the end of the block. Then he walked to the Volvo and sat in it without starting it, his wet jacket darkening at the shoulders and the city moved around him the way cities move without consulting anyone about the timing. 3 days went by. They had the specific texture of 3 days that are being endured rather than lived, not bad days, just days that are too aware of themselves. Nathan took Ren to school. He answered 18 work emails and did not answer 2. He stood in the kitchen on Thursday evening for a long time before he realized he had been standing there because the teal apron on the hook had a small stain on the hem he had never noticed before, or had noticed, and then stopped noticing, and was now noticing again. Ren said at breakfast Friday, "Are you going to Harbor Light today?" He said, "I don't know." She said, "Claire's laptop keeps freezing. She told me. I told her you'd fix it." She said this with the complete calm of someone who has resolved a logistical matter between 2 parties and is simply communicating the resolution. Nathan looked at his coffee. "When did she tell you?" "She texted," Ren said. "She has my number. I gave it to her," Ren said. "When?" "The folder day," Ren said and finished her orange juice. Nathan's phone lit up at 9:47 that morning, a number he did not have saved but recognized by the area code. The message said, "The laptop is still freezing. Also, I owe you an apology, and I don't like owing things." He read it twice. He put the phone face up on the counter, which he did not usually do. He replied at 10:15. "The laptop has a memory issue. It's not difficult to fix." He thought for a moment, then added, "Neither is the other thing." She came to Harbor Light that Saturday with coffee in 2 cups from the place on Rainier that does not have a logo, just a phone number on the cup. She handed him one. They sat at the table near the window where the light comes through at an angle in the afternoon and talked for 2 hours, not about the foundation, not about Victor Ashford, not about what had been said or not said. They talked about the work, about why she had started Harbor Light, about a woman named Dorothy, who had been the first person Claire had helped, who now volunteered on Saturdays and had opinions about filing systems that Ren would have respected. Nathan talked about systems, not the financial ones, the other kind. The kind built to keep something from collapsing that doesn't know it's close to collapsing. Claire listened the way some people listen, with her whole attention organized toward the speaker, not waiting for her turn, but actually there in the words. At one point she said, "Did you know when you came in that first day that I didn't know?" He said, "I assumed you didn't. Most people don't connect the name." She said, "I should have looked harder." He said, "I made it so you wouldn't have to." She looked at him. He looked at his coffee cup. "That was wrong," he said. "That was my wrong, not yours." Victor Ashford's final attempt arrived by registered letter on the following Monday, a formal complaint to Child Protective Services, citing Nathan's deliberate misrepresentation of financial circumstances to his minor child's school district, and questioning his fitness as a sole custodian. The letter was 4 paragraphs long and had a law firm's name at the top. Nathan read it standing at his mailbox in the cold. He folded it in half. He put it in his jacket pocket. He went inside and made Ren's lunch. The hearing was 3 weeks later, in a room that smelled of carpet and recycled air. A different room, the same smell. Claire brought 4 people from Harbor Light, a social worker, 2 families Nathan had helped, without knowing they had filed the paperwork to say so, and Dorothy, who sat in the front row in a coat that was too large for her, and did not move from the moment she sat down to the moment it was over. The judge read the complaint, then read the responses, then looked at Victor Ashford's attorney and said, with the particular economy of a judge who has been doing this for 22 years, "Is there anything here that is not already contradicted by the record?" The attorney said, "Your Honor." The judge said, "That's what I thought." The investigation into Victor Ashford's conflict of interest in the development contract was opened by the city's ethics office on the following Thursday. Nathan did not follow its progress publicly. He knew how it would end. December in Seattle has short days and long evenings and rain that is not dramatic, but is simply there the way a fact is there. Wren had decided that the apartment needed a decoration she described as a branch with lights, which Nathan had interpreted as a small tree, and which Wren accepted without argument, possibly because she understood that the branch was a negotiating position. They put it on the table by the window. The teal apron still hung on the hook. Nathan had not moved it. He had also, without planning, stopped not looking at it, which was different. He took Wren to the supermarket on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks before Christmas, the Rainier Valley one on Alderton. Dorothy was at Register 3, wearing a Harbor Light volunteer badge and a wool cardigan, with a button missing at the 3rd spot from the top. She had started volunteering there 2 months ago, which Nathan knew, because Claire had told him, because Wren had asked, because Wren had her own line of information that moved through entirely separate channels. Claire was there. She had come to drop off Dorothy, who did not drive, and had stayed because the produce section had a display of apples she was considering for an event at Harbor Light, and wanted to look at them in person first, which was not the entire reason she had stayed, but was a true reason and therefore usable. She was holding 2 apples and comparing them when Nathan and Wren came around the corner of the aisle. Wren said, "Claire." The way you say the name of something you have been thinking about. They moved through the store, the 4 of them, in the loose formation of people who have not agreed to shop together, but are shopping together. Wren held Claire's hand at one point, reaching for it, without looking the way she did with Nathan when she was thinking about something else, automatic possessory, certain. Claire looked down at the small hand. Her face was not readable in the way that certain faces are not readable when something is happening inside them that they are not yet ready to translate. At Register 3, Dorothy rang up their groceries. She was slow and deliberate, and she chatted to the couple behind them in a way that made them not mind waiting. When she handed Nathan his receipt, she held on to it for 1 extra second, not long enough to mean anything, but long enough to be intentional. She looked at him, and she looked at Claire, and she looked at Wren, and she said, "You all look like something that makes sense together." Then she released the receipt. Nathan was quiet in the parking lot. Wren was carrying the bag with the apples. Claire's car was 3 spaces over. The morning air was cold and specific, the kind of cold that makes breath visible, and all 3 of their breaths were visible, and for a moment nobody said anything. Wren set the bag down. She reached into her coat pocket, her small coat pocket, the one with the iron-on patch over a hole from last February, and took out a small box. She held it out to Nathan. He looked at it. He looked at her. She said, "You asked me to hold it, but you didn't say for how long." He took the box. She picked up the grocery bag. He turned to Claire. The box was small, no bigger than what it was, and he held it at his side for a moment before he opened it, because he was thinking about how to say something he had practiced twice, and now found that the version he had practiced was not the right version. What came out instead was, "I built systems for a long time, things to prevent failure, things to hold structure, things that work correctly because they account for what can go wrong." He paused. "I have not, until recently, accounted for what can go right." He opened the box. "You are what can go right. You and Wren and Dorothy and the terrible filing system and the boiler. All of it. I don't want to account for it away anymore." Claire was looking at the box. Then she was looking at him. Her breath was visible, and her eyes were full of something she wasn't going to say, and did not need to say, because he could see it the same way. You can see weather before it arrives, not the specific form, but the size of it, the weight. "Yes," she said, quietly, completely. Wren made a sound that was technically celebratory. Dorothy at the register inside had somehow ended up at the window, watching through the glass. She put one hand on it. She did not knock. The teal apron came down from the hook in January when they moved, not thrown away. Folded once, placed inside a box, marked with Wren's handwriting, kitchen important, and carried into the new place the one with 3 bedrooms and a yard that had a tree. Wren had assessed and approved, and a kitchen with more hooks than their old apartment had by 4. Nathan put it on the second hook from the left. Claire watched him do it. He smoothed the fabric, once straightened the strap. He did not explain this. She did not ask him to. Wren was already in the backyard, standing under the tree, looking up through the branches, breath visible. Morning coming in at an angle through the fence slats, crossing the yard in long lines. She had her arms out slightly at her sides, the way she did when she was thinking. Not for balance, just for the physical fact of it, the way a person holds themselves when they are inhabiting a moment they have been waiting for, without knowing they were waiting. The kitchen was warm. The coffee was on. Outside, Wren looked up at the branches, and the light moved through them the way light moves through things it has no reason to avoid. She dropped her arms. She went inside.